It was Tuesday. Not even a special Tuesday. Just another mind-numbingly ordinary Tuesday at 3:17 a.m. at the gas go on Route 16, when humanity made first contact with an advanced alien civilization. Dave Miller was halfway through his night shift, debating whether to eat his sad ham sandwich now or save it for his sadder 4 a.m. break, when the fluorescent lights flickered and a sound like 1,000 dial-up modems having simultaneous seizures filled the air. "If this is another power surge, I swear I'm not resetting the slushy machine again," Dave muttered, not even looking up from his dog-eared paperback. That's when the automatic doors slid open, and standing there, well, hovering there was something that definitely wasn't the usual 3 a.m. meth enthusiast looking for beef jerky. The being had 6 limbs, blue-tinted translucent skin, and a head that looked like someone had crossbred an octopus with a chandelier. It wore what appeared to be a highly sophisticated spacesuit covered in blinking lights and symbols. Behind it, through the gas go windows, Dave could see an honest-to-God spaceship hovering over the parking lot, conveniently taking up all 4 handicap spaces. Dave raised an eyebrow and set down his book. "Are you going to buy something? Or are you just letting all the air conditioning out?" The alien's head pulsed with soft blue light as it produced a small orb from what might have been a pocket. The orb hovered between them, scanning Dave with a thin red beam. "Greetings, dominant Earth specimen," the orb announced in a voice that sounded like James Earl Jones gargling metallic marbles. "I am Commander Vrex of the Galactic Confederation. We have come to evaluate your species for potential membership." Dave glanced at his watch. "Look, man, my shift ends at 7, and I've still got 4 hours of existential dread to get through. Can you abduct someone else? The Waffle House down the street has way more interesting people." The orb pulsed. Calculating response, error, unexpected reply, recalibrating translation matrix. Commander Vrex's head chandelier wiggled in apparent confusion. The orb dimmed and then brightened again. "Let me rephrase. We are an advanced civilization offering you the stars. You should be awed and humbled." Dave leaned forward on his elbows. "Does advanced civilization mean you guys have figured out how to make a printer that doesn't jam every time you have something important to print?" "We have eliminated the need for physical documentation." "Ah, that actually is impressive." Dave reached below the counter and pulled out a bag of Flamin Hot Cheetos. "Want one? They're on sale, 2 for $5. Commander Vrex's confusion was palpable. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. The orb buzzed and sparked slightly. Scanning primitive nutrition cube, analyzing error, substance classified as both food and poison. "Yeah, that sounds about right," Dave nodded, popping one into his mouth. Within 20 minutes, 3 more aliens had entered the gas go, all apparently high-ranking officials based on their increasingly elaborate head ornaments. They huddled near the refrigerated drinks section, occasionally casting bewildered glances at Dave, who had resumed reading his book while eating Cheetos with chopsticks to avoid getting orange dust on the pages. The translation orb floated over to Dave again. "The Supreme Council requests clarification. Are you not the leader of this world?" Dave snorted Cheetos dust. "Me? God, no. I'm not even the leader of this gas go. That would be Sheila, but she's on vacation in Tampa with her boyfriend, who I'm pretty sure is actually married to someone else." "Then who speaks for Earth?" Dave thought for a moment. "Technically. Like a couple hundred different countries. The UN sometimes, corporations most of the time, and social media influencers, if you want to get really depressed about it." The orb emitted a sound that might have been the alien equivalent of a frustrated sigh. "Your governance structure is chaotic and inefficient. However, as you are the first human we have engaged with, Galactic Protocol dictates that you shall be designated interim representative of Earth." Dave stared blankly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I just work here." But Commander Vrex was already communicating with the mothership, and in a spectacular display of cosmic irony, Dave Miller, community college dropout, owner of 3 partially completed punch cards from different sandwich shops, and man who once tried to microwave a can of soup without opening it, became humanity's ambassador to the stars. As it turned out, the Galactic Confederation had been monitoring Earth for decades but had decided we weren't worth contacting until we matured past our primitive technology phase. They had finally decided to check in on us, expecting to find either a post-apocalyptic wasteland or slightly more advanced primates. Instead, they found Dave, whose complete lack of interest in their advanced technology and casual dismissal of their authority completely shattered their understanding of how developing species were supposed to behave. "So let me get this straight," Dave said, locking up the gas go as his shift ended. "Alien invasion or not, Sheila would kill him if he left the store unlocked. You guys have been watching us, decided we were too dumb to talk to. And now you're disappointed that I'm not falling to my knees in gratitude because you finally decided we're worthy of your attention?" Commander Vrex's head tendrils drooped slightly. "When you phrase it that way, it does sound somewhat condescending." "Somewhat?" Dave raised an eyebrow, climbing into his rusted Honda Civic while the aliens awkwardly folded their multiple limbs to fit in the passenger seats. "Look, if this whole evaluation thing is happening, I at least need coffee first. Real coffee. Not the gas go sludge that's been sitting since yesterday." And that's how Commander Vrex, Supreme Galactic Evaluator Zorn, and cultural anthropologist Klixa ended up at Denny's at 7:30 a.m., trying to comprehend the concept of a grand slam breakfast while Dave calmly sipped his coffee, completely unperturbed by the fact that first contact was happening over slightly rubbery pancakes and mediocre bacon. The Galactic Confederation wasted no time implementing their standard evaluation protocol for pre-spacefaring civilizations. Unfortunately for them, they designed all their tests around their own definition of intelligence. "This assessment will determine your species' capability for abstract reasoning," announced Commander Vrex, setting up a holographic puzzle that resembled a cross between a Rubik's Cube and an MC. "Escher drawing with a migraine." Dave stared at it for approximately 3 seconds. "Yeah, I'm not doing that. But this is the standard intelligence assessment. All species must." "Listen, Vrex, I barely passed high school geometry. But I bet if you take that thing to Meti or Caltech, someone there will solve it before lunch." Frustrated but determined, Vrex decided to test humanity's technological adaptability instead. The aliens set up an examination facility in an abandoned Blockbuster video store, which they deemed appropriately obsolete technology for their purposes, and invited various humans to demonstrate problem-solving skills. "The task is simple," explained Evaluator Zorn to a randomly selected focus group of humans. "Prepare this quantum fluctuation stabilizer using only the tools and materials provided." The humans stared at the scattered alien components and the pile of Earth tools that the aliens had deemed approximately equivalent to what would be needed. 40 minutes later, Evaluator Zorn returned to find the stabilizer not only repaired but also apparently improved, with 3 humans arguing over whether adding flame decals would make it work faster. "How did you accomplish this?" Zorn's head tentacles were practically tied in knots with confusion. "Well, Jason here is a plumber Aisha used to fix jet engines in the Air Force, and I watch a lot of YouTube tutorials," explained one woman, shrugging. "None of us knew what this thing was supposed to do, so we just started connecting parts that looked like they should go together. And then we wrapped the connections in duct tape," added Jason proudly. "And WD-40 for the moving parts," Aisha chimed in. "WD-40? Repeated Zorn, scanning the substance with a handheld device. "This primitive lubricant should not function with quantum technology." Jason patted Zorn's shoulder condescendingly. "If it moves and it shouldn't, use duct tape. If it doesn't move and it should, use WD-40. Universal laws, my dude." Back at the temporary headquarters, a now closed Denny's because Dave refused to do alien stuff during their open hours, Commander Vrex was composing his 3rd report to Galactic High Command and finding it increasingly difficult to maintain an objective tone. "The humans continue to defy conventional categorization," he dictated while pacing irritably. "They possess primitive technology yet constantly misuse it in ways that inexplicably yield results. Their approach to problem-solving lacks any coherent methodology, yet they consistently achieve outcomes through what can only be described as chaotic intuition." Cultural anthropologist Klixa, who had been enthusiastically immersing herself in human culture, popped her head in. I've made an extraordinary discovery about human cuisine. They deliberately make some foods painfully spicy, not for nutrition or preservation, but for fun. Vrex's eye stalks drooped. Add it to the list of inexplicable behaviors. The assessments continued. The aliens tested human physical capabilities, only to discover that, while humans weren't particularly strong or fast compared to many species, they had baffling endurance. They tested human creativity, and became disturbed by humanity's simultaneous fascination with both creating and destroying things. They tested human emotional intelligence, and were horrified to discover that humans regularly used sarcasm, deliberately saying the opposite of what they meant, as a primary form of communication. I still don't understand, Vrex complained to Dave one evening as they sat on the hood of Dave's car behind the gas and go, looking up at the stars. Your technology is primitive, your biology is fragile, your societal structures are chaotic, and yet we keep figuring things out? Dave suggested, offering Vrex a microwave burrito. The commander had developed an unexpected addiction to them, particularly the bean and cheese variety. Precisely. You shouldn't be able to function as a society, let alone thrive. You're like geological anomalies. I think you mean biological. No, I mean geological. You're like diamonds formed under pressure and inexplicably hard to break. Vrex took a thoughtful bite of burrito. My latest report describes Earth as simultaneously the least and most threatening planet we've encountered. Dave grinned. Yeah, that sounds about right. 3 weeks after first contact, Dave was working another night shift when Clixa burst through the gas and go doors, all 6 of her limbs gesticulating wildly, head crystals flashing in distress patterns. Dave. Catastrophic news. The Confederation Supreme Council has reviewed Vrex's reports and implemented Containment Protocol Alpha 7. Dave didn't look up from his phone. Is that the protocol where you guys finally pay for all the beef jerky you've been eating? Because Sheila's starting to notice the inventory discrepancies. No, it's much worse. Clixa projected a hologram from her central eye stalk, showing Earth surrounded by a fleet of spacecraft. The Council has deemed Earth too unpredictable to allow free galactic movement. They're establishing a blockade, a gentle quarantine. They're calling it. Dave finally looked up. They're putting the entire planet under quarantine because we make them nervous? Not exactly. Clixa shifted uncomfortably. The official reason is protective observation of a developing species. But the unofficial reason is that the Council is terrified of what would happen if humans spread throughout the galaxy. That seems excessive. Does it? Just yesterday, Commander Vrex witnessed a human child dip French fries into a milkshake. He's been in psychological counseling ever since, muttering about the incompatible combination of temperatures and textures. Dave shrugged. Fair point. The quarantine fleet arrived with impressive efficiency. Massive ships took up positions around Earth, establishing an imposing presence that was immediately detected by Earth's various space agencies, military radar systems, and one particularly attentive amateur astronomer in Nebraska who initially thought his telescope lens was dirty. What the Galactic Confederation didn't account for was humanity's response to being told they couldn't do something. Within days, amateur radio operators had established basic communication with some of the lower-ranked blockade ships. Within a week, a group of university students had reverse-engineered enough alien technology to broadcast "Never gonna give you up" to the entire fleet. Within 2 weeks, an underground market for authentic Earth souvenirs was flourishing among alien crew members. I don't understand, Vrex complained, watching as a junior officer furtively exchanged galactic credits for a lava lamp, a collection of bottle caps, and a partially used gift card to Olive Garden. We've established a strict quarantine. How are these exchanges even happening? Humans are resourceful, Clixa explained, her voice filled with admiration. Did you know they developed an entire shadow economy inside their primitive educational institutions based on the exchange of small sugar discs called Smarties? Dave, who had been brought to the command ship as a cultural consultant, and because he was the only human who could explain memes to Clixa, nodded. Elementary school candy trading is basically a crash course in capitalism and black market operations. Meanwhile, the quarantine was failing spectacularly. Curious alien crew members were sneaking down to Earth for cultural research, returning with tattoos, unusual haircuts, and strong opinions about Earth music genres. Earth governments were officially outraged about the blockade while unofficially negotiating technology exchanges. 3 different corporations had already filed patents for alien-inspired products that were essentially just normal products with more ladies attached. The final straw came when Admiral Jex, commander of the blockade fleet, discovered that his personal shuttle had been temporarily borrowed by 2 junior officers who wanted to attend something called a rave in Berlin. "This containment is an utter failure," Gex declared during an emergency council meeting. "Instead of containing humanity, we're being contaminated by them." Clixa, who had been appointed as the official human cultural expert, mostly because everyone else was too terrified to take the job, cleared her throat. "If I may suggest, perhaps we've been approaching this incorrectly. Instead of trying to isolate humans, perhaps we should establish controlled cultural exchange protocols." "You mean officially allow interaction?" Vrex seemed horrified. "Consider the alternative," Clixa replied. "Right now, we have unregulated black market exchanges. 3 fleet captains have developed addictions to human coffee. 7 cultural officers have started human social media accounts. And just yesterday, I caught Navigator Plex trying to explain weekend vibes to his navigation team." The council chamber fell silent. "Fine," Admiral Gex finally conceded. "But we need a controlled environment for these interactions, and a human representative to establish formal diplomatic relations." All eye stalks turned toward Dave, who was in the corner of the room, teaching a junior officer how to play cat's cradle with a piece of string. Dave looked up. "What? No. Absolutely not. I told you I just work at a convenience store." Admiral Gex's expression turned serious. "Mr. Miller? Miss Anne. You are the only human who has demonstrated the ability to explain your species in terms we can comprehend without causing mass psychological trauma to our personnel. That's not a qualification for being a diplomat." "According to our research into human diplomatic history," Clixa interjected, "it actually puts you well ahead of the curve." And so, against his will and better judgment, Dave Miller, who had never even been elected to student council, found himself appointed as Earth's first galactic ambassador. "This is ridiculous," he muttered as Clixa helped him into a hastily modified Confederation formal outfit. "I'm not qualified for this." "That's exactly why you are qualified," Clixa replied cryptically. "Now, are you ready to address the Galactic Council?" Dave sighed. "As ready as I'll ever be to represent the entire human race while wearing what feels like a disco ball crossed with a graduation gown." The Galactic Council chamber resembled the inside of a giant glass geode, with thousands of crystalline surfaces reflecting the light of distant stars. Representatives from over 300 species occupied floating platforms arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking podium. The chamber hushed as Dave was escorted to the podium by Commander Vrex, who looked like he was having several simultaneous anxiety attacks. "Just follow protocol," Vrex whispered urgently. "The traditional greeting is 3 chirps followed by a formal statement of peaceful intentions." Dave nodded, stepped up to the podium, and promptly sneezed from the alien incense permeating the chamber. Several delegates gasped. One small, furry representative fainted. Sorry about that," Dave said, wiping his nose. "Allergies, I think. Anyway. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave. I sell beef jerky and lottery tickets back on Earth, but apparently now I'm speaking for humanity, which is weird, honestly." The Grand Arbiter, the towering being with skin like polished obsidian and eyes like miniature nebulae, leaned forward. "Human representative, you have failed to perform the sacred greeting, and have instead chosen to begin with a personal anecdote." "Yeah, sorry about that. Vrex told me there was a whole chirping thing, but I can't actually make that sound without swallowing water wrong." "You apologize for your biological limitations?" The Arbiter seemed confused. "I mean, yeah, it would be rude not to." The chamber erupted in whispers. The Arbiter raised a hand for silence. "It's fascinating. The Krislak's delegation has spent 14 cycles refusing to acknowledge the Moldovan Empire because they cannot produce the proper greeting frequency. Yet you simply apologize and move on? Dave shrugged. I guess. Look, I'm really not qualified for this, but I figure diplomacy is mostly about finding ways to get along despite differences, right? Another wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. Several delegates began frantically taking notes. What followed was perhaps the most unorthodox diplomatic session in galactic history. Dave, having no knowledge of proper protocol, simply responded to questions honestly and directly. When asked about Earth's governance, he gave a rambling explanation that somehow covered democracy, dictatorships, and his personal theory that most countries were actually run by whatever corporation donated the most to the last election campaign.
When the representative from Nexus Prime, a species renowned for their technological prowess, asked about Earth's computer systems, Dave replied, "Oh, we mostly use them to look at pictures of cats and argue with strangers." The Nexian representative appeared deeply disturbed. "Your quantum computing capabilities are dedicated to feline imagery?" "Well, not just that. There's also an unhealthy amount of videos of people falling down." Somehow, through Dave's complete diplomatic ineptitude, or perhaps because of it, Earth emerged from the session with 7 trade agreements, 3 cultural exchange programs, and an invitation to participate in the Galactic Sports Tournament. Apparently, the concept of competitive eating had deeply impressed the gluttonous hierarchy of Belbulon 6. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity's characteristic adaptability was creating its own diplomatic incidents. Commander Vrex, who had been temporarily reassigned as a liaison officer, returned to the Confederation flagship looking haunted. "They've adapted our translation technology to create something called Universal Duolingo," he reported to Admiral Gex. "Now, humans everywhere are learning alien languages just to, and I quote, slide into alien DMs." Worse still, Earth's children had proven particularly adept at understanding alien technology. A 12-year-old from Winnipeg had hacked into the supposedly unhackable Confederation network just to see if they could, leaving behind a digital signature that translated to LOLL aliens use weak passwords. This incident resulted in Commander Vrex's immediate demotion to Human Containment Specialist, a title he protested was not even a real position. "It is now," Admiral Gex informed him grimly. "Your sole responsibility is preventing further human-caused chaos." Meanwhile, Klixa had embraced her role as cultural anthropologist with alarming enthusiasm. She had established a popular galactic tube channel called Humans Explained, where she attempted to decode various human behaviors for an increasingly fascinated alien audience. "Today we'll be exploring the concept of memes," she announced in one broadcast, her head crystals glowing with excitement. "These are information packets that humans transmit to each other for amusement, though their actual purpose remains enigmatic." The screen behind her displayed a picture of a woman yelling at a confused-looking cat. "This image has been shared billions of times, yet no human I've interviewed can adequately explain why it's considered humorous. My working theory is that it's actually a sophisticated psychological test to identify individuals with specific neurotransmitter configurations." Dave, watching from the sidelines, didn't have the heart to tell her that sometimes things were funny precisely because they made no sense. As chaotic as human diplomacy was proving to be, had an unexpected benefit. Species that had been locked in centuries-old diplomatic stalemates found themselves united in their baffled reactions to humanity. Historic enemies now sat together, shaking their heads in shared disbelief as they watched humans introduce concepts like casual Fridays and potluck dinners to formal galactic proceedings. "Perhaps," suggested one ancient and respected diplomat to another, "if humans can ignore 10,000 years of protocol without causing immediate war, we might reconsider our position on the Great Napkin folding dispute of the third cycle." Across the galaxy, entrenched positions began to shift. Not because humans were particularly wise diplomats, but because their complete disregard for ancient grudges made those grudges suddenly seem rather silly. The peaceful, if chaotic integration of Earth into galactic society came to an abrupt halt 6 months after first contact, and when long-range sensors detected an approaching threat that sent the Galactic Confederation into panic mode. The Void Collective, a hive mind composed of energy beings that consumed organic life to fuel their expansion, had changed course and was heading directly toward Confederation space, more specifically toward Earth. This is unprecedented, explained Admiral Gex during an emergency council session. The collective has never altered their expansion pattern before. They must have detected something on Earth that attracted their attention. All eyes turned to Dave, who was drinking coffee from a mug that said "World's Okayest Ambassador." What? Don't look at me. I have no idea what would attract energy vampires to Earth. He paused. Although we do have a lot of reality TV. Maybe they sensed a spiritual kinship? The joke fell flat as holographic projections showed the collective's massive fleet approaching. The Confederation's military leaders presented their defensive strategy, an organized, logical response based on centuries of tactical doctrine. It failed spectacularly. The Void Collective didn't fight according to any recognizable pattern. Traditional Confederation formations were useless against an enemy that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. 3 defense fleets were decimated in the first engagement. In desperation, Admiral Gex convened a strategy session that included Dave, Klixa, and several high-ranking military officials. Our traditional approaches are ineffective, admitted the Admiral gravely. The collective's hive mind anticipates our every move because we fight according to established doctrine. Dave, who had been doodling on a napkin, looked up. So you need to be unpredictable? Precisely, but our military is trained to follow specific protocols. We cannot simply abandon 10,000 years of tactical evolution. Dave sipped his coffee. Have you considered doing the opposite of whatever makes sense? The military officials stared at him. I'm serious, Dave continued. If they can predict what a logical opponent would do, be illogical. That's not how military strategy works, protested one officer. It's how humans work sometimes, Klixa interjected, her crystals pulsing with excitement. They call it thinking outside the box, and it's one of their most distinctive cognitive patterns. Admiral Gex considered this. What exactly are you suggesting, Ambassador Miller? Dave shrugged. Let humans handle this. We specialize in doing the unexpected. And so, in what would later be recorded as either the most brilliant or most insane military decision in Confederation history, Admiral Gex authorized the formation of a human-led task force to counter the Void Collective. What followed was a crash course in human warfare tactics for the bewildered Confederation officers. Dave assembled a team of Earth's most creative thinkers, not military strategists, but game designers, improvisation actors, kindergarten teachers, and one particularly imaginative janitor from Cleveland named Frank, who had some ideas about space battles. The humans approached interstellar warfare with the same chaotic energy they approached everything else. Instead of logical formations, they suggested random patterns based on vibes. Instead of targeting the most strategic enemy vessels, they recommended aiming for the ones that look like they'd be most annoyed about being shot at. This isn't strategy, complained one Confederation tactical officer. This is madness. Exactly, grinned Dave. And madness is something the hive mind can't predict. The first engagement using human tactics was nearly aborted when the Confederation officers realized the battle plan had been partially derived from something called Dungeons and Dragons. You want us to roll for initiative? Asked a confused Admiral Gex. Trust me, Dave assured him. Randomness is our ally here. Remarkably, it worked. The Void Collective, accustomed to opponents who fought according to logical principles, was thrown into disarray by ships that performed barrel rolls for no tactical reason, captains who sent nonsensical messages on open channels just to be distracting, and attack patterns based on what would annoy me most if I were an energy vampire. The tide began to turn. The collective, for the first time in its existence, was forced to retreat and reconsider. In the aftermath of the first successful defense, Admiral Gex found Dave in the observatory of the flagship, looking out at the stars. Your tactics were unorthodox, the Admiral admitted, but effective. However, this is merely a temporary setback for the collective. They will adapt. Dave nodded. That's why we need to go weirder. Weirder? The Admiral's eye stalks twitched nervously. Much, much weirder. Dave grinned. Let me tell you about something humans call dad jokes. The final confrontation with the Void Collective took place in the asteroid belt of Earth's solar system. The combined Confederation fleet, now operating under what they reluctantly termed human protocol, faced the regrouped collective armada. All ships in position, reported Admiral Gex from the command center, ready to implement Operation Rickroll. Dave nodded solemnly. Execute on my mark. And remember, timing is everything. What followed would forever change galactic warfare. As the Void Collective initiated its attack pattern, every Confederation ship simultaneously broadcast the same message on all frequencies, a combination of the lyrics to Never Gonna Give You Up, 20 of the internet's most impenetrable memes, and a collection of dad jokes so terrible that several human crew members had filed formal protests about their inclusion. The hive mind, which processed all information collectively, experienced the equivalent of a massive cognitive disruption, essentially the galaxy's largest brain freeze. They're disoriented, shouted a tactical officer. Collective ships are breaking formation. Phase 2, Dave commanded. The Confederation's engineering corps, under the guidance of a team of human mechanics who had been introduced to alien technology exactly 3 weeks prior, activated what they dubbed the jury-rigged reality disruptor, a combination of quantum technology, Earth computers running Windows 95, and, inexplicably, 6 toasters. The device generated a field that interfered with the collective's energy patterns, essentially giving the hive mind the equivalent of a migraine headache. In the confusion, Earth's hastily assembled defense force, a motley collection of retrofitted commercial vessels captained by people whose primary qualifications were good at video games, or watched a lot of sci-fi movies, executed a series of attack runs that defied all logic yet somehow found every weak point in the collective's defenses. The coup de grace came when Frank the janitor, who had been given command of a small scout vessel despite having never left Ohio before, executed what would later be termed the Cleveland Steamer, a maneuver involving his ship, an asteroid. 3 rubber bands, no one ever adequately explained how these were involved, and a trajectory that even the ship's navigation computer described as mathematically inadvisable. Whatever it was, it worked. The heart of the collective fleet was thrown into disarray and then systematically dismantled by the waiting Confederation forces. As the last enemy ships retreated into deep space, the command center erupted in cheers. Admiral Gex approached Dave, who was calmly eating a bag of chips. Ambassador Miller, the Admiral, said formally on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I extend our deepest gratitude to humanity. Your unique approach to warfare has saved countless lives. Dave shrugged. We didn't really do anything special. Humans are just good at being weird when we need to be. That, declared the Admiral, is precisely what makes your species simultaneously the most terrifying and most valuable addition to galactic society. In the months that followed, the galaxy settled into a new normal. The Galactic Confederation created a special classification for Earth, Protected Unpredictability Zone. This designation acknowledged both humanity's unusual value and the general consensus that humans were probably safer kept somewhat contained. Dave returned to his job at the Gas and Go, though now the convenience store had become something of a tourist attraction for aliens visiting Earth. He regularly had to explain to confused extraterrestrial visitors that no, the slushy machine was not an example of primitive cryogenic technology, and yes, humans really did voluntarily consume something called gas station sushi. Commander Rex, in what was widely regarded as a punishment posting, was assigned as Earth's permanent Confederation liaison. He took up residence in a small apartment above the Gas and Go, where he spent his evenings watching human television shows and trying to understand why anyone would voluntarily watch something called reality TV. I still don't understand, he complained to Dave one evening as they sat on lawn chairs on the Gas and Go roof watching the sunset. Your species is capable of defeating an enemy that threatened the entire galaxy, yet you also created something called competitive hot dog eating. Dave shrugged. Humanity contains multitudes. That's not an explanation. No, but it's a quote from a famous human poet, which makes it sound profound enough that you'll stop asking questions. Rex's eye stalks drooped in defeat. Meanwhile, Clixa had become the galaxy's foremost expert on human culture. Her book, Humans, a Survival Manual, became an instant bestseller throughout Confederation space. The first chapter, titled Why They Do That, a comprehensive guide to behaviors that make no sense, was required reading for any alien planning to visit Earth. The most popular chapter, however, was Earth Idioms Decoded, Clixa had spent months compiling and attempting to explain expressions like raining cats and dogs, closed but no cigar, nada. And that's how the cookie crumbles to a bewildered galactic audience. Her conclusion, which became something of a galactic proverb, stated, to understand humans is to accept that you will never fully understand humans, and they're perfectly fine with that. Perhaps the most significant change was in how the wider galaxy viewed Earth. What had once been dismissed as a primitive, barely worth contacting planet was now regarded with a mixture of respect, fear, and fascination. Confederation species began incorporating human approaches to problem solving, though usually with extensive safety protocols in place. Several prestigious universities established departments of human studies, where scholars attempted to determine whether humanity's chaotic approach to existence was somehow an advanced evolutionary strategy rather than what it appeared to be making things up as they went along. Earth, for its part, embraced its new role in galactic society with characteristic enthusiasm and disregard for convention. Alien exchange students became common at universities. Interstellar tourism boomed. Human fashion briefly included a trend of wearing modified Confederation uniform pieces as accessories, much to Commander Rex's horror. Dave Miller, despite repeated attempts to resign his position as ambassador, found himself continually pulled back into galactic politics whenever a situation arose that required what Admiral Gex termed the human perspective, which everyone understood to cat. I mean, someone who might suggest something so bizarre that it just might work. As Dave explained to a group of new alien visitors while ringing up their purchases of beef jerky, lottery tickets, and commemorative Gas and Go t-shirts, the galaxy expected us to be either primitive monkeys or hyper-advanced beings. Instead, they got humans contradictory, irrational, brilliant, and ridiculous all at once. That's our superpower. One of the aliens, a Regilian with shimmering purple skin, tilted its head. But is that not inefficient? Absolutely, Dave replied, bagging their items. And that's precisely why it works when nothing else does. The universe is chaotic. Turns out the species best adapted to chaos is the one that embodies it. The bell above the door jingled as Frank entered, now sporting a commemorative jacket with Cleveland steamer emblazoned across the back. Since his legendary maneuver, he'd become something of a celebrity, even scoring a lucrative endorsement deal with an alien beverage company. Their slogan, Frank's Choice, defying mathematical advisability since 2025, had become inexplicably popular throughout 3 sectors. Hey, Ambassador, Frank called out, grabbing a jumbo slushie. I've got a message from the Confederation. Something about the Arcturian delegation being profoundly disturbed by human music videos. Dave sighed. Which ones? All of them, apparently. Tell them it's an art form. Already did. They want to know why the art requires, and I quote, excessive pelvic gyrations and incomprehensible narrative structures. Cultural expression, Dave replied with practiced ease. Frank nodded. Also, Admiral Gex called. The Confederation Council wants your input on the negotiations with the Draxian hegemony. What's the issue? The Draxians demand 17 different ceremonial procedures before discussions can begin. The council's been stuck for weeks trying to accommodate them. Dave thought for a moment. Tell them to suggest a pizza party instead. Frank blinked. Seriously? Completely serious. Frame it as a sacred Earth custom for building trust. Everybody sits around a table, shares food, talks informally. No protocols, no ceremonies. That'll never work, Frank replied. 3 days later, the first Galactic Pizza Summit resulted in the most comprehensive trade agreement in Confederation history. Draxian diplomats, initially confused by the casual format, found themselves charmed by the concept of communal dining without rigid hierarchical structures. By the time they reached the dessert course, a hastily improvised attempt at intergalactic ice cream, 7 long-standing territorial disputes had been resolved. The Confederation subsequently established a Department of Human Solutions, tasked with applying Earth's unconventional approaches to stubborn problems. Their first major project involved resolving a millennium-old religious conflict between 2 species who each claimed to be the universe's chosen people. The human mediator, a former stand-up comedian from Detroit, suggested they were both right but had misunderstood the assignment. The universe, she explained, had chosen them specifically to annoy each other, thus teaching the cosmic value of patience. Remarkably, both sides found this explanation satisfying. Meanwhile, Earth itself was changing. Alien technology gradually integrated into daily life, though rarely as intended. Gravity manipulation units meant for scientific research became the foundation for the world's most extreme theme park rides. Faster than light communication devices were predominantly used for streaming entertainment and multiplayer gaming. A Confederation diplomat observed with horror that humans had modified a quantum probability predictor designed to forecast complex astronomical phenomena to handicap horse races. Clixa, continuing her study of human culture, published a follow-up to her bestseller titled Humans, Why They're Like That. It featured an entire chapter on how Earth's nations, despite gaining access to unlimited clean energy and matter replication technology, still maintained bizarre local customs like complaining about the weather and putting pineapple on pizza. The chapter Human Contradictions, a field guide, became required reading for all Confederation anthropologists. In it, Clixa documented numerous peculiarities, including humanity's simultaneous fear of and fascination with change, their tendency to name destructive weather events, and their inexplicable attachment to clearly uncomfortable footwear. Perhaps most perplexing, she wrote, is that humans recognize their own irrationality, joke about it extensively, and yet persist in it with something approaching pride. When questioned, many respond with the phrase, "That's just how we roll," which appears to be less an explanation and more a declaration that no explanation will be forthcoming. Commander Rex, still stationed above the gas NGO, gradually developed what he called a human resistance index, his ability to hear absurd suggestions without immediately rejecting them. On a scale where 10 represented complete acceptance of human logic and 0 meant total resistance, he proudly announced to Dave that he had reached a 3.5. Last week, he explained, your president suggested solving interplanetary tariff disputes with a 3-legged race. And I only spent 4 hours composing a rejection before realizing it might actually work. Progress, Dave nodded approvingly. The most profound change, however, came in how humanity viewed itself. Having faced extinction and instead finding themselves elevated to galactic problem solvers, humans embraced their reputation with characteristic enthusiasm. Schools began teaching lateral thinking alongside traditional subjects. Businesses boasted about their human-inspired unorthodox approaches. T-shirts reading chaotically effective and making no sense since 10,000 BCE became popular fashion statements. 1 year after the defeat of the Void Collective, the Galactic Confederation held a formal ceremony to commemorate the victory. Representatives from every member species gathered on their capital world. Dave, despite his protests that he was just a guy who happened to be working when aliens showed up, was invited as Earth's principal delegate. Admiral Gex, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Confederation Forces, presented humanity with the Order of the Cosmos, the highest honor in known space. As Dave accepted the Crystalline Award, holographic displays showed scenes from Earth, children playing in parks, scientists in laboratories, artists at work, and ordinary people going about their daily lives. The Void Collective believed predictability was strength. Admiral Gex announced to the assembled dignitaries. They sought to impose perfect order on a chaotic universe. What they failed to understand, what we all failed to understand before meeting humans, is that chaos itself is not our enemy. It is the very fabric of existence, the source of innovation, creativity, and resilience. He gestured toward Dave. Humanity doesn't fight chaos. They dance with it, they embrace the unexpected and transform it into possibility. They reminded us that the greatest strength isn't in perfect order, but in perfect adaptability. Dave, uncomfortable with the formality but recognizing the importance of the moment, stepped up to the podium. He had prepared nothing, despite Rex's increasingly panicked suggestions that a speech for such an occasion required at least 6 months of drafting. We're just people, he said simply. We make mistakes, we contradict ourselves. We do stupid things for smart reasons and smart things for stupid reasons. But we keep going. That's not a strategy or a philosophy. It's just what humans do. We muddle through, we improvise, we laugh at ourselves, and somehow we find a way forward. He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds. The galaxy is weird, he continued. Life is weird. If there's one thing humans understand, it's how to be comfortable with weird. So thanks for the fancy award, but the real victory wasn't defeating the collective. It was all of us from different worlds and different evolutionary paths. Figuring out how to work together despite our differences, that's the real triumph here. As he returned to his seat, Ambassador Clixa leaned over. That, she whispered, was the most human speech possible. Is that good? Um, it made no logical sense, followed no known diplomatic protocol, probably offended 17 different cultural sensibilities, um, and yet somehow expressed exactly what needed to be said, she replied. So, yes, very good. Back at the Gas and Go, now officially designated as informal embassy of Earth, despite Dave's strenuous objections, life settled into a new routine. Tourists from across the galaxy still came to see the legendary site where humanity first joined galactic society. Many posed for photos with the slushy machine, now marked with a plaque reading "Not a cryogenic experiment." Dave still worked his shifts, still restocked shelves, and still chatted with customers both human and alien. But now, every few weeks, a Confederation ship would arrive. And he'd be whisked away to help resolve some seemingly intractable problem with what had become known throughout the galaxy as the human approach. As for Earth itself, it remained much as it always had been: beautiful, contradictory, frustrating, and wonderful. Despite access to advanced technology, humans still argued about politics, created bizarre entertainment, fell in love, made mistakes, and somehow kept moving forward. Now they just did it all with a slightly broader perspective. And whenever a new civilization was contacted by the Galactic Confederation, the briefing always included one essential warning: prepare to encounter humans. They make no sense. This is their greatest strength.